We've been talking about things that happened during the civil rights movement, and today we have somebody very special that we would like you to know, and to know her story, a fantastic story. So I'd like her to come, and we're so happy to have you today. Mm-hmm. And can you introduce yourself?
Yes. I'm Julia Chaney-Moss. I am the fourth child of Annie Lee Chaney and Ben Amos Chaney Sr. Yeah, this is a picture of my mother with J.E. We affectionately call James J.E. Initials of his, it's a Southern thing. His name was James Earl Chaney, so he was J.E. This is a picture of him at 21. There were 5 of us. It was Barbara, my oldest sister. There was James, who was J.E., and Janice, and myself, and then Ben. Growing up in Mississippi, as a family, our community was very close-knit. It was a community, very homogeneous. It was a community that there were no kids that could not find a meal or a bed to sleep in. All parents were connected in being supportive to every child in our community. My father, Ben Chaney Sr., was a college man. He had graduated college. He went to an agricultural and technical college and learned the trade of construction and finishing. He was a master of finishing interiors throughout the South. Most of the major city, state, and federal buildings and schools he had a hand in. And my mother was, she was a magic lady. She was a lady with a lot of magic kind of tools, because her management of her family was such that every one of us knew we were loved, knew we were cared for, knew we were provided for. We never encountered any unusual or any racial situations. And that in and of itself, as I grew up and began to be more aware of the environment, particularly after what happened to J.E., I began to look at my community and at my city differently, because I had a new realization. I had a new understanding of risk that I grew up not knowing. And I was so absolutely felt so much gratitude that our parents did that for us, because I was 17 years old when I discovered I could be killed and nobody would do anything. And that's a very frightening thought for anybody at any age, but I didn't have to learn that until 17. School for us, J.E. was in high school. I was in junior high school. Our school, our teachers were awesome as well, because Mississippi has an African-American curriculum. That curriculum almost excludes us from having information about certain things. When Jay became 17, he had begun to attend local NAACP meetings. And in that process, he had begun to become enlightened about change and about and the focus on Mississippi. What you know about the civil rights, there was a transition from the lunch counters to the bus and then to Mississippi. Nothing was supposed to occur in Mississippi because there was a tight rein, and the community the Caucasian community was assured that everything was under wraps. Nothing of that nature was going to happen in Meridian, Mississippi. And Mississippi was known as the last bastion of segregation. They were in it to win it and to keep it, just in that framework. So when he began to get enlightened and decisions were being made in New York, out of all of the other efforts that had gone on, the beauty of this is that there were Black women around the table. Ella Baker, and a couple, Constance Baker Motley, and a few other women that was looking at Mississippi and saying, this is what we will do. Now, the whole thing of voter registration in Mississippi, none of us had really voted. My dad, because he was a businessman. Dark secret is, there was this guy that would come every election year with what they call a chit. Sit on the porch with my dad. My dad would sign it, choosing who he was voting for. We didn't know that then. I didn't know that until I was an adult. I didn't know that he had that opportunity until I was an adult. And in talking with him about that, he said that life at that time, he had so many things that he could do that could help him take care of his family, that could help him protect his family. And that those are the things that he focused on. That's why he was never controversial, never got into any kind of movement or anything, never even thought of that stuff. In fact, that was just not who he was. But it was enlightening to find out that he had that privilege. And it was also a little enlightening to find out that you better keep your mouth closed. And for family, that's what you did. You did what the adults told you to do. And after a while, we never thought about it anymore. We never thought about it anymore. However, we didn't. J.E. did. And it began his involvement with, as I said, with the NAACP. And because on summers during, after school, those summers, my dad would bring him to wherever the job he was, because he was training him in how to do it. Although J.E. would share with us that, yeah, he liked, to go and to hang out with his dad. He said, but I'm really not going to do any construction. So he had a plan of his own, as most young men do, and they don't have anything to do with what their parents want them to do. Same thing with young ladies too. So it was not going to be, he had already decided for himself that yes, I go summers, I will work with my father, therefore I have money that I can then, purchase the things that I want for school the next year. And he then, and he decided that that's exactly how he would work this for him. So doing that, he decided that he would attend, he was asked by a classmate to come with him to an NAACP meeting. And he said, okay. And he went. He went to an NAACP meeting, and he was gathering data, getting enlightened, and I'd hear him ask my mother sometimes, "Mom, why do we have to live like this?" And my mother would say, "Boy, that's just how it is. That's just how it is." And So he and a friend of his had decided that they want to know. And he had also asked her, do we live this way all over? And she says, pretty much. And so he and a friend of his had decided the summer of, I think about 62, they had decided they were going to take a road trip. His friend had a car. Their parents had brought him a car. And they were going to take a road trip across the South. They left from Mississippi and they went as far as Arkansas and Texas. They came back and he, in his conversations with Mommy, he said, yeah, it seems like that's just how we live. Everybody, the places that he'd been, talked about the places that they had been to, some of the jobs that they had taken to keep gas so that they could keep moving. He said, yeah, it's pretty much that way. But he says, I still don't know why we have to live this way. He says, I don't believe this is all that there is for us. And my mother said, it shouldn't be. And yes, we're all capable of more. This is how things are here in Mississippi. She says, now you may go north. Things may be a lot different, but this is how they are. As you saw, as you went through the South, you felt the same circumstances, same situation, same families going through the same thing. And so, with that, I guess became in his mind, and continuing with those meetings and becoming more and more informed and more connected in terms of resources and looking at the concepts of challenge. And when he chose to do that, he started out first when the announcement for the Mississippi movement, the announcement for the long summer Mississippi, and it was going to be the voting registration drive. The women at that table made it very clear this had to be a segregated effort, that we needed to get college kids, black and white, to be a part of this effort. Black people cannot do this by themselves. If we attempt this, do you know how many kids we're going to kill? So we have to make this segregated because we're not going to even get to one door if we're sending all black people, all black students down. And there went the call then for, on the college campuses, offering young people the opportunity to have a summer job in Mississippi where they were voting. And they were going to meet on campus, and Mickey Schwerner came in 1963. He and Rita came to manage the COFO office. And by then, J.E. had worked throughout Mississippi, the backwoods, the towns and cities, and pulled together all of the resources that they were going to need. Going to need places to have the voting registration classes. Places to have the voter registration classes could be churches, basements, whatever. And pastors were willing to take that risk. We're also going to need families for these young people to house, so that when they came, they would have somewhere to go. So that for the entire year of 1963, he built that framework. He built that background. He built the availability of sites and people all of the resources. And 1964, they were going, Mickey and Rita were established in 64 because they came in early 64. And they were going to a college campus where they were doing the training of those students. And it was there, June 20, 20th, I think, they got the call that one of the churches in Philadelphia had been burnt. The pastor and parishioners, a couple of parishioners had been killed. The others had been beaten. They were older individuals. They were beaten and injured. And Mickey decided that, and Mickey and Jay decided that they were coming back because they needed to make sure that they were okay and that other resources had not been disrupted. So they were coming back, and Andrew Goodman decided that he wanted to come with them rather than wait for the end of the group and then come down a couple of months later. So they wanted to go. They had stopped by. My mother made biscuits. Mickey Shorner loved my mother's biscuits, so he would come by if there's biscuits on the table. And so they came to pick up Jay and headed out for Philadelphia and Neshoba County. And getting there, they had heard that the pastor had been beaten, his wife had been beaten, a couple of parishioners were killed, and one other person, older man, had been beaten and was still hospitalized. So that the idea was that they would go and they would come back, and we didn't. And they were met along the road, and the police, of course, stopped them and arrested them. Now, my brother, Jay, knew the back roads like the back of the front of his hand. But Mickey wanted to drive. Before that, Rita wanted to come. But Jay told Mickey, if you bring Rita, I'm not going. He says, I am not going to be a black man in the car with a white woman. I'm not going. And he told Rita, okay, you have to stay home because you got to go. So they left. And getting there, they were stopped. And taken to jail on a trumped-up charge. Anything would do. A light out, no air in your tire, anything. But they were taken to jail and kept till midnight and released. And as they began to leave, they were stopped again. This time, they were taken out. I understand that they weren't supposed to have been taken out. They were supposed to have been driven to the site of the earthen dam where they were going to bury them. But they stopped at another spot that's a mile from Killen's house. And they stopped there because Killen wanted to remember that that's the site where they were killed every time he left his house and came home. So they were stopped. They were, my brother was hung, Jay was hung on this site and beaten with what's called trace chains. Trace chains are those thick metal chains that you can haul a car with. that's used on farms. The autopsy of his body, the doctor said every bone in his body was broken. He'd never seen a body so ravaged except in high-speed plane crashes. During this beating, Mickey and Andy watched. And when they cut Jay down, Mickey went up and grabbed him before he hit the ground. He was on his knees with him. And one of the men came up and says, "Oh, you that nigger lover." Shot him under the arm, in his heart. And Andy made a turn to someone, it was said, was thinking that he could get away. And he was shot immediately. They loaded the bodies back up on whatever they loaded them on. They had already taken the car and put it in a swamp. Thought they could immerse it, but it didn't work. And it was found a couple of days later by one of the Indians, one of the natives, discovered. And of course, everyone knew nothing. And the word is, these boys are sitting up in New York having a beer. I know they probably would have if they could have. Yeah. Wouldn't even have to go to New York to have a beer. They could do that in Mississippi if they actually wanted to. But with that, when they took them to the burial site, there was supposed to be a backhoe that was digging the pond. It was an earthen dam for a rich person's swimming pool, in-ground pond that he wanted to have. And when they got there, they weren't supposed to beat them and kill them there. But this is to address Killen's desire. And when they got to the site, the backhoe was gone. This guy had gone home and gone to bed because it was said that he perhaps felt that, oh, well, maybe it's not tonight. And they had to get him out of bed to come back and dig the hole, dig the where they were going to bury them, that area. And he did. And he was buried. What's most interesting also is that in Andy Goodman's autopsy, there was red clay dirt in his lungs. Andrew Goodman was not fully dead when they shot him, when they buried him. He was not fully dead. He took at least one breath because that red clay dirt, the autopsy found in his lungs. Yeah. That then led to the aftermath. And the aftermath in terms of our family, because the Goodman, and the sad thing about Andrew Goodman is that his first day in Mississippi was the last day of his life. That's mind-blowing. But here again, this is the illustrious Jim of the South. And these things happen. Yeah. Whether a lot of rumors then began to come about in terms of where they are. Oh, they're here, they're there, they're doing this. They could be on the West Coast somewhere, sunning in the fun, funning in the sun, well, however it goes. All of this. My mother was steadfast. I watched my mother and the tracks of her tears in the house, outside the house, around the house. Because, and all she asked for, give me my son's body. I just want to know where my child is. Yeah. 44 days before they miraculously found, someone told, and they were able to find the body. And that is not the end. That was merely another beginning, another painful reality and beginning. Because it's, grief is a work, it's a job. It's a very intimate job because there's no time limit. There's no place. There's no, okay, grief, glad that's over. You don't get those moments. In fact, it lasts a lifetime because its purpose is when you least expect it, or when you do expect it, you know, and you learn to live with it. You learn to live with it. You learn to befriend it so it doesn't hurt so much over the years. It's a piece of work, but then so is life, right? Piece of work. I remember when Jay would come in from scouting towns in Mississippi, we would, my mother would close up the house, pull the shades down, make sure the windows are locked, pull the shades down, turn the light off, and we'd sit on the floor. And he would tell us of the families that he visited, of the pastors' churches that he visited, of those who said yes, those who said no. And my mother never forbid him. She never told him, boy, you ain't got no business doing this. She never forbid him. The one thing she did say to him, after each of those sessions, and he would come in a 2-week period, she said, boy, you know you can get killed for this. And he would kind of chuckle, yeah, Ma, I know. Very casual, very unconcerned, but committed. During this trial, my mother was so happy that we'd finally gotten to a place where someone would charge killing. I mean, they chose only one person to charge. In 1767, there was a trial in Meridian, Mississippi, but it was a trial regarding obstructing their civil rights, of course. And nobody could find Killen guilty because he was a pastor. So everybody sitting in there, they were all white. There were no African Americans invited to be a part of this jury, or even part of the audience. So there were a couple of African American people, the Charles Youngs, and another brother that was standard in the community, Dr. Polk. I think it was a black doctor. But nothing came of it. And so that we're 2005, we get a letter from the, the state of Mississippi stating that there was going to be a trial, that Killens was going to be arrested, and that there would be a trial. And he was charged with murder. First time it ever happened. We never thought it would, considering the years that's gone by. My mother would have walked to Mississippi if she had to, because she was going to tell her story. And my older sister, Barbara, went with her. I stayed. I simply refused. I did not wish to be there. And I thank my family for understanding that I didn't want to be there. And so therefore, my niece had a stroke at 32, and she was quadriplegic. And so I stayed home, my older sister's daughter. So I stayed home with her, continued to work. And Ben, my younger brother, also went with them. And during this trial, we got blow by blow every day because they were on the phone, sharing what was going on. And fortunately, there were friends of mine who actually, and it was televised, and they actually videotaped the trial for me so I have these discs at home that I've never looked at. And my mother got her wish. Her wish was to look him in the face and ask him, why would you kill my child? She got the opportunity to do that. And she got the opportunity to share all of what she felt over the years and what she was feeling that very day. That very day, when I talked to her in the evening, it was like a sigh of relief when she said, yeah, I told him what I thought. I told him how I felt. I told him all. She did. And my sister also, and my brother Ben also. And when they found him guilty, which was an absolute miracle, we have to understand the transition that had taken place in the community. There was a Philadelphia coalition of black and white community people that were coming together to address this. And the Philadelphia coalition was also, in addressing this, there was a truth and justice component where Caucasian women, and the black women in particular, began to be a strong knit group because they told each other the truth. One woman told, white woman told this black woman that it was her father that had beaten her father when she was 12 years old. And that I think they were both about the same age. So if she, as the daughter was 12, the black woman that she was speaking to, both of them having aged into maturity, she knew that her father had been beaten. Nobody knew who. She finally found out. And it's only through that Philadelphia coalition that those kinds of connections were made and people were willing to acknowledge, their culpability in situations and name relatives putting their own lives at risk. Because one woman honestly said, I don't know what my cousin may do, or I don't know what my uncle may do, but I'm just going to tell y'all the truth. You know, when this happened, that was my uncle. He's the one. Oh, that was my cousin. Well, that was my brother. You know, they began to collect and connect around us, which built a really unified community, this Philadelphia Coalition. And out of that came the president of the coalition, who was really a very insightful man, and who was responsible for my getting some of the information that I've shared with you, like what happened at the site of their death, and who did what and why Killen had decided that. One thing most people, I know they don't know, and that is that the day after they had beat them and buried them, Killen came and cleaned up that area, took all of the guns back to the Meridian, Mississippi Police Department, because it was the Meridian Mississippi Police that actually was a part of this cabal. And that hardly anyone has put that together, but thank God for the Philadelphia Coalition and their ability to, a Truth in Action Committee, and their ability to tell each other the truth without punity, and still be able to care for each other. Thank you, my sister.
Thank you for sharing that story, that horrible story with us. And I can tell in your voice, the pain of what you and your family have been through is still there within you.
Yeah.
And God bless you.
Those are the badges we carry inside. Thank you.